The vast expanse of space stretched beyond the horizon, an endless ocean of darkness dotted with the faint glimmer of distant stars. The USS Vanguard, a massive human warship, moved through the silent void, its engines humming softly as it maintained a steady course. The crew had been on patrol for weeks, keeping watch over the remote sectors of the galaxy, where human colonies were often vulnerable to marauding alien forces. Tensions had been rising with the Zoan Confederacy, and the political situation was growing more volatile by the day. But today, something different, something far more ominous awaited them. Lieutenant Commander Elena Hawke, the stern and battle-hardened officer at the helm, stood at the center of the bridge. Her dark eyes scanned the view screen, flicking from one tactical readout to another. Every so often, she would glance toward the star maps on the wall, her thoughts wandering. Space, in all its infinite emptiness, had always been a place of mystery, but this particular patrol felt different. The silence had taken on an almost oppressive quality. Even the most seasoned officers on board could feel it. "Commander," said Lieutenant Marco Perez, the ship's chief sensor officer, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "I'm picking up something on long-range sensors." Elena's eyes snapped to him. "What is it, Perez?" "I'm not sure, ma'am," Perez replied, his fingers moving rapidly over the console. "It's not like anything we've encountered before. It's a massive object, much larger than anything in the vicinity, and it's moving directly toward us. Fast!" Elena's stomach tightened. The Vanguard was one of the most advanced warships in the human fleet. It was armed with powerful weapons, equipped with the latest in defensive technology, and its crew had seen action on numerous occasions. Yet, this felt different. The sheer size of the unknown object was enough to cause concern. She had a feeling this encounter would be unlike any they had faced before. "Bring up the visual," Elena ordered, her voice sharp. A few moments later, the view screen flickered and adjusted to reveal the silhouette of a massive vessel, its contours jagged and dark, barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. The size of the craft was staggering, easily 3 times the size of the Vanguard. There were no familiar markings, no sign of life or civilization, just a hulking, ominous presence in the dark void. "It's not showing up on any known sensor frequencies," Perez added, his voice now tinged with unease. "It's almost as if it's cloaked, but not in the way we know. This is something else entirely." Elena's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "Shields up, prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Aye, Commander," replied Ensign Taylor, the ship's tactical officer. She began inputting commands into her console, and the hum of the Vanguard's shields activating reverberated through the bridge. "Weapons are at the ready. Keep your focus," Elena instructed, pacing in front of the viewport. "We don't know who or what we're dealing with, but we'll be damned if we let them take us by surprise." The silence in the command center was almost unbearable. Everyone on the bridge knew they were staring down the unknown. The Vanguard was designed to defend humanity against the worst, but there was something eerie about this ship, something that sent a cold shiver down Elena's spine. "We're entering range," Perez said. "Whatever it is, it's not responding to our hail. No signs of communication, just static." Elena's brow furrowed. The ship's refusal to communicate was troubling. In her experience, the unknown was always more dangerous when it refused to reveal its intentions. "Keep hailing them. Open a channel on every frequency we know," Elena commanded. Her words were met with silence, a deep, unnatural stillness hanging in the air. Then, out of nowhere, the strange vessel began to pulse, a deep, rhythmic hum, almost like a heartbeat. The sound wasn't loud, but it resonated within the Vanguard's hull, vibrating in ways that were almost instinctual. "I've never heard anything like this before," Perez murmured, his fingers trembling as he worked the controls. "The frequencies are all over the place. It's like it's speaking, but not in any language we can decode." Elena's hands tightened into fists at her sides. "Can you jam it?" "I'm not sure, ma'am. The energy coming off this thing is off the scale. I'm not even sure how it's generating the signal. Whatever this ship is, it's not like anything we've seen." A chilling thought began to form in Elena's mind. If this ship had the power to disrupt their sensors and their communication systems this easily, it might be able to do far worse. She felt her instincts kick in, sharpening her focus. This wasn't just a random encounter. Whoever or whatever was on that ship had technology far beyond anything humanity had. Suddenly, the deep hum was joined by a sharp, piercing noise that rattled the bridge. The sound felt like it was cutting through her very bones, and the crew flinched at its intensity. The sound felt wrong. It was as if something was trying to reach into their minds. "Commander!" Perez shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Something's happening to the ship. It's like it's taking control of our systems." The lights on the bridge flickered, casting eerie shadows. The Vanguard trembled, as if the force of the alien signal was physically affecting the ship. "Shields holding?" Elena barked. They're fluctuating," Ensign Taylor replied, her fingers flying over the console. "The energy signature is too erratic. I can't stabilize them." Elena's heart rate increased as she realized the gravity of the situation. "Prepare for evasive action. All personnel brace for impact." But before the order could be completed, the enemy ship did something unexpected. It didn't fire. Instead, it released a burst of energy, a brilliant flash of light directly at the Vanguard. The bridge shook violently, the force of the blast rattling everything, and the lights went out entirely. For a few agonizing moments, there was nothing but darkness. "Report!" Elena's voice was tight with fear, but she forced it to remain steady. The tension in her chest was almost unbearable. "Commander, systems are failing!" Perez yelled, his voice full of alarm. "The core is destabilizing. We've lost power to most of the systems. The hull integrity is compromised." "How long do we have?" Elena demanded. "Not long," Perez replied, his voice barely audible. "We're losing atmosphere. Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7. If we don't get control soon, we're going to have to abandon ship." The words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. Abandon ship? That was unthinkable. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of humanity's strength in the galaxy. But if the alien ship had this much power, they might have no choice. Before she could process the thought further, an explosion rattled the entire vessel. The sound was deafening and the bridge was plunged into deeper darkness. A scream pierced the air from somewhere down the hall, followed by another explosion. "Prepare for impact!" Elena shouted once more as she grabbed onto the nearest railing to steady herself. The ship continued to shake, throwing everyone off balance. The walls groaned and creaked, the entire structure of the Vanguard straining under the onslaught. And then, the most terrifying thing happened. The Vanguard's emergency alarms went off, signaling a complete breach in the ship's core. Elena's stomach lurched as she realized that the alien ship wasn't just attacking them, it was attempting to disable their very means of survival. "Commander!" Parrish yelled. "It's too late. We can't fix this. The ship is dying. We need to get off the Vanguard now." The reality of their situation began to sink in. This was no ordinary skirmish. They weren't fighting for territory or pride. They were fighting for their lives. And if these aliens had the technology to render the Vanguard a floating wreck, there was little hope of surviving their full assault. But Elena was a fighter. She had always been, and she wasn't about to give up without a fight. Her crew, her people depended on her. "No," Elena said, her voice low and determined. "We're not abandoning ship. Not yet. There's still hope. We just have to find it." As the alarms blared and the ship continued to deteriorate around them, Elena looked out at the distant alien ship. For the first time in her career, she felt a deep, bone-chilling terror. What had they discovered? And more importantly, would they survive to tell the tale? The story continues in the subsequent chapters, but this discovery was only the beginning of a nightmare that humanity might not be ready to face. You said, please expand it to 3K words as a 2-chapter of this story. The discovery. ChatGPT said chapter 2. The discovery. The hum of the USS Vanguard had stopped. Silence pervaded the broken, flickering bridge like a suffocating fog. Elena Hawke gripped the cold edge of the console, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Her heart hammered in her chest as she processed the nightmare unfolding around her. "Commander, we've lost everything," Marco Perez, the ship's chief sensor officer, said, his voice thin with panic. "The core's unstable. We're barely holding on. I don't know how much longer we can keep going." Elena's mind raced. They'd been hit hard. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's first line of defense against the vast, uncaring darkness of space. It was designed to take damage and keep fighting, but this was something else entirely. Whatever the alien ship was, it had power and control that surpassed anything the humans had encountered in over a century of warfare. Her fingers clenched around the console and she leaned forward, forcing herself to focus. Panic could wait. She couldn't afford to break down now. "Report, Lieutenant Taylor," Elena demanded, her voice sharp as steel. She was trying to drown out the gnawing fear clawing at her mind. "We've lost the primary reactor," Taylor replied, her voice strained but steady. "Decks 3, 5, and 7 are completely compromised. I'm showing multiple hull breaches. The escape pods are still functional, but no escape pods." Elena cut her off, her voice firm. "We're not abandoning this ship, not yet." "But, Commander," Taylor started, her voice shaking, but Elena held up a hand. "I know the risks. We don't have time for hesitation. If we don't fight back, the Vanguard is a tomb and we'll all be buried with it. Do we have any weapons still functional?" Taylor hesitated, looking down at her console. "Some, but the targeting systems are offline. The main guns are barely operational." "Get them back online," Elena said, her voice quiet but her determination clear. "We'll make do with what we've got. We'll buy ourselves time to figure out what this ship is, and then we'll finish it." Perez, still at his post, cursed under his breath. "I'm picking up another signal, Commander. Same frequency as before. It's almost like the ship is broadcasting directly into the ship systems. It's controlling them." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "Not just attacking us then, it's trying to subvert our systems." "Yes, ma'am," Perez confirmed. "The resonance is intensifying. Whatever this thing is, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's alive. At least I think it is. We're dealing with something biological. The energy signatures aren't mechanical. It's more like an organic construct, like a living ship." Elena's voice trembled despite her best efforts to stay composed. "Yes, or something else," Perez replied, his voice filled with uncertainty. A cold shiver ran down Elena's spine. She'd fought in battles where the enemy was as ruthless as they were logical. Alien races that had seen humanity as little more than another species to be conquered. But the idea that their foe now might be a living entity was far more terrifying than she had imagined. The implications were staggering. An organic ship, alive, sentient, and hostile. There were no rules for dealing with something like that. "How long until it's at full power?" Elena asked. Perez looked at the screen, his face pale. "At this rate, we don't have much time. It's already seeping into our systems. We're looking at a full shutdown within the next 20 minutes, maybe less." The countdown loomed like a dark shadow over the crew, but Elena knew they didn't have that long. This alien ship, whatever it was too close to their heart, the Vanguard, and it was growing stronger by the second. The Vanguard wasn't just a warship, it was a beacon of humanity's strength. If they couldn't fight back, the consequences would be dire. Elena snapped to attention. "Everyone to their stations. We may not have much time, but we fight with everything we have." She turned to Perez. "Can we disrupt its signal? Somehow block its influence over our systems?" Perez nodded, though his face was strained. "I can try to initiate a feedback loop. It might disrupt the signal, but it could cause even more damage to our systems in the process." "That's a risk we'll have to take," Elena said, her voice hardening. "Do it. We need a window of opportunity." Perez immediately got to work, his fingers flying over his console. His face was a mask of concentration, but there was an undercurrent of fear in his eyes. No one had ever been up against anything like this. Humanity had faced the threat of annihilation many times before, but this was different. This felt wrong on a level they couldn't understand. "We've got a feedback loop initiated," Perez announced, his voice tinged with a mixture of relief and trepidation. "But it's unstable. We have only a few minutes before it becomes uncontrollable." Elena nodded grimly. "That will have to do. Get the weapon systems back online now." The crew moved with a sense of urgency, their training kicking in. The ship was failing, but they weren't about to go down without a fight. Elena had served in enough battles to know that sometimes you had to fight against impossible odds, and sometimes you won by surviving long enough to find a way through. Moments passed like hours, each one marked by the growing hum of the alien ship seeping deeper into the Vanguard. Elena's thoughts raced. What kind of alien species had created something like this? What did they want? How had they found humanity's corner of space? Another explosion rocked the Vanguard. This time it was a more distant sound, but no less terrifying. Elena clenched her fists. The enemy ship wasn't just attacking them with raw firepower, it was dismantling them from within, disrupting their systems one by one. And the longer they stayed connected, the more control it would have over the ship. Suddenly, Perez's voice broke through the tension. Commander, the alien ship's communication frequency, it's starting to respond. It's not just noise anymore. Elena's head snapped up. What do you mean? It's like a message, but it's not in any language I recognize, Perez said, his voice dropping. It's like it's speaking directly to us, not through the ship systems. I feel it in my head. Elena froze. What are you saying? Are you hearing it now? Perez nodded slowly, his eyes distant. Yes, and it's not just a voice. It's more like a presence. Something is reaching out. I'm not sure if it's the ship itself or something else entirely, but it's pushing into my thoughts. It feels alien. Terrifying! Elena turned to Ensign Taylor, her face pale, her hands gripping the console like it was the only thing holding her upright. Can you confirm the origin of the signal? Elena asked. Taylor's hands shook as she navigated her console. It's coming from the ship, but it's not like any signal we've encountered. It's personal. It's reaching out, like it knows us, like it knows me. A wave of cold terror washed over Elena. She had seen what alien technology could do to the human mind, how it could warp perceptions, break wills, and even erase memories. The Vanguard was a military ship. It was built to fight, to defend, but no technology could prepare a crew for an attack on their minds. We need to stop this, Elena said, her voice trembling slightly, despite her best efforts to maintain control. If it's attacking our minds, it'll break us before we can even fight back. We're losing contact with most of the secondary decks, Perez reported, his voice ragged. The crew is becoming disoriented. People are not responding like they should. Elena's jaw tightened. She knew the situation was growing dire. The alien ship's power wasn't just technological, it was psychological. It had infiltrated their minds. It wasn't just trying to destroy their ship, it was trying to break them from the inside out. Shut it down, Elena ordered. All systems. If we can't fight it with weapons, we fight it with everything else. Shutting down non-essential systems, Taylor replied, fingers flying over her controls. This may buy us some time, but we need to act quickly. A moment of quiet followed, only broken by the relentless hum that filled their minds. But then, just as Elena began to hope they might have found a way out of the mental onslaught, the view screen flickered. The shape of the alien ship appeared once more, its massive form looming large against the backdrop of deep space. It wasn't just a ship, it was a harbinger, and it was coming for them. To be continued. You said, please expand it to 3K words as a 3-chapter of this story. The Discovery ChatGPT said, Chapter 3, The Awakening. Elena Hawke stood rigid, her hands clenched into fists at her sides as the USS Vanguard groaned under the weight of the alien ship's presence. The once mighty warship, now crippled by an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, felt more like a dying animal than the formidable vessel she had commanded for years. The bridge was in disarray, her crew scrambling to keep things functioning, but it was clear to Elena that they were fighting an opponent that they could not fully comprehend. The hum of the alien ship, that insistent low-frequency resonance that had burrowed deep into their minds, still filled the air. It was no longer just a sound, it was a presence, a malignant intelligence pushing into their thoughts, clawing at their senses, dragging them to the brink of madness. Elena had fought countless battles, had faced the fires of war and the chilling uncertainty of space, but this was different. This felt personal, as if the very fabric of their being was under assault. Commander, Perez said, his voice tense. We've isolated the frequency. The signal is still there, but it's evolving. It's almost like it's adapting to our defenses. What do you mean adapting? Elena demanded, her voice low, controlled. But inside, the pressure was mounting, the urge to break under the weight of this unknown force gnawing at her. The frequency is changing, Commander, Perez continued, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's like the ship is learning. The longer we stay in its range, the more it understands us. It knows what we're doing to try and fight back. It's one step ahead. A shiver ran down Elena's spine. The implications were horrifying. Not only did the alien ship have the power to cripple them physically, but it could also outthink them at every turn. Humanity's greatest strength, its ingenuity, was being neutralized by a force they could neither comprehend nor anticipate. Lieutenant Taylor, Elena snapped, her mind racing. Status on the escape pods. Taylor looked up, her eyes dark circles under them from lack of sleep. The pods are still functional, Commander, but she hesitated, glancing at the now blank control panels. The alien ship, it somehow locked us in. I can't access the launch controls. It's like it's shackling us in place. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking in the weight of her choices. We can't run. We can't afford to. We have to hold our ground and find a way to fight back. We need to buy time any way we can. Commander, I have an idea, Perez interjected, his voice suddenly gaining strength. Elena turned toward him, her gaze hard. Spit it out, Perez. I think the alien ship's signal is linked to its ability to control our systems, he said, hands flying across the console. If we can create a counter frequency, something that disrupts its wavelength, we might be able to sever the link it has with the Vanguard. It would be a long shot, but it might give us the window we need to regain control. Do it, Elena commanded immediately. We'll buy you the time you need, but make it quick. We don't have long before it completely overwhelms us. Perez's fingers hovered over the console for a moment, the tension palpable as he worked through calculations that were far beyond the scope of any previous engagements. Elena could feel the weight of the seconds ticking by. Every passing moment brought the alien ship closer to victory, closer to breaking their resolve. The feeling that they were completely outmatched gripped her like an iron fist, but Elena refused to surrender. Perez! Taylor's voice shot through the silence, tight with urgency. We're picking up something on the sensors. Elena turned to her with a raised brow. What is it? I don't know, Taylor said, staring at her readout. It's coming from the alien ship. It's not a weapon, though. It's a projection of some kind, a shape, a form. I'm getting a strange reading, but I'm not sure what it means. It's sending something our way. Elena's stomach dropped. Whatever this alien ship was, it was no longer just a distant threat. It was right on their doorstep, like a predator closing in for the kill. And now it was speaking to them. Not through words, but through something far more unsettling. Paris's voice cut through the rising tension. I've got the frequency set up. I'm sending the counterwave now. Let's hope this works. A silence followed. Elena watched, her fingers twitching at her sides as Paris activated the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship jolted again, violently this time, as if the Vanguard itself had been struck by an invisible hand. The lights flickered, and the low hum of the alien ship's signal grew louder, then began to distort. It's working, Paris said, his voice nearly a whisper. I'm getting a response, but it's not stopping. It's fighting back. It's more powerful than we thought. Elena's mind raced. Every second they spent fighting this unknown presence was a second they were closer to losing. If Perez's plan didn't work, they'd be out of options. Then the shape appeared on the view screen. It wasn't a ship, at least not in the traditional sense. The projection was ethereal, shifting and flickering between various forms. For a split second, it resembled an ancient humanoid figure, tall, thin, with long, flowing limbs. The creature's face was masked in shadow, but Elena could feel its gaze, could feel its eyes, even though they weren't visible. It was as if it was looking into their souls. Commander, Perez said, his voice trembling now, I think it's trying to communicate. Elena's skin prickled with the realization. This isn't just a ship. It's an intelligence, a being. The projection on the screen shifted again, this time turning into something far darker. The humanoid form morphed into something more alien, more monstrous, its limbs elongated unnaturally, and its face split open in a jagged mouth, revealing rows of gleaming teeth. The eyes were no longer hidden, two piercing, impossibly deep orbs that seemed to glow with an internal light, staring directly at them. A surge of emotion hit Elena like a physical force. Fear. Yes, but also something deeper. The creature on the screen wasn't just threatening them, it was studying them, understanding them, and was waiting for them to make a move. Then the projection spoke. The voice that came through the speakers wasn't what Elena expected. It wasn't a language, but a feeling, a vibration that struck at the very core of her being, rattling her thoughts. It wasn't something that could be easily understood with words, but the meaning was undeniable. Why do you fight? The voice reverberated through the bridge, shaking their minds. It was an inquiry, it was a command. A demand. Perez gasped, his hands trembling as he clutched the console. It's in my head, it's asking me questions. I can't resist it. Elena shouted, her voice hard. Focus! Don't let it control you! But it was already too late. Perez's body began to twitch, his head jerking as though something invisible was pulling at him. His eyes glazed over, unfocused, as he muttered, It's too strong. I can't. The alien's voice came again, this time not directed at Perez, but at Elena herself. You are not like the others. You are different. You fight. You resist. Why? Elena stood frozen, every muscle in her body taut as a bowstring. How was this thing communicating with them? What did it want? Why were they so important? Her mind churned, but it was all so overwhelming. The alien intelligence seemed to be studying them, probing their thoughts and emotions, looking for a weakness. We fight because we are human, Elena said, her voice ringing with authority. We survive, and we will never give up. The projection flickered again, its form shifting. It seemed to contemplate her words before the glowing orbs of its eyes narrowed. Survival, the voice intoned. Such a primitive instinct, but it is the same in all. The same desire. Elena swallowed, her heartbeat thundering in her chest. The thing was aware of them. It understood them maybe more deeply than anything she could comprehend. And yet it was still an alien, a thing beyond the stars that had the power to destroy them with ease. You will understand, it continued. Its voice now softer, almost soothing. You will become, Elena's mind recoiled. Become what? The shape on the screen flickered once more, and then, as if to answer her question, the alien ship shifted in the distance. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was alive and growing, stretching out like an enormous undulating organism, its tendrils reaching out toward them. Become like us, the voice said softly, or be consumed. The transmission cut out abruptly, the screen flickering back to static as the alien ship resumed its steady approach. The Vanguard's crew stood in stunned silence. And in that one undeniable truth took shape. The fight had only just begun.